All right, let's get it. So first, we want to thank everybody for listening. It's truly a gift, and we appreciate your time and coming in and just listening. And we believe every time we hit these microphones, we add value. And that's our job, is to navigate through these journeys of all these creatives and so forth, and to bring them to light. Today we have somebody extremely special, and once I'm not here alone. My name is Corey Ochai. Yeah, you guys, if you've been listening, I'm here with some company. That's so right. Let's bring in the next one of my good dear friends. I'm gonna let me bring in himself, and let's do it.
I'm Josh Snyder, and you're listening to Thoughtful Discussions. Thank you so much for listening. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an exciting part of the midweek to be able to get in here and really enjoy this good thoughtful discussions.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Absolutely. And today we're going to talk about our guest we have in today. Excuse me. She is, when I say, is one of my favorite people to talk to conversate with, especially of this new generation and the things that she's doing that just. It just blows my mind every time I sit down and have a conversation with this lady. She is just an amazing person. I can tell you everything she does, but I want you guys to hear it from her. But it is an honor to have on the podcast today, Miss Emma Riva. How you doing?
That's so sweet of you, Corey, to say that I'm one of your favorite people to talk with. That's high praise, because you're such a great conversationalist.
I appreciate
that's very sweet of you.
I mean every bit of that, Emma. I mean every bit of that. So let's just start off with, Emma, who are you, and what are the things that you enjoy doing in this world?
So as stated, I'm Emma Riva. That's my name. I'm an author and a fine arts journalist and a book artist are the three things I usually list in my professional bios. So I write books, I write text about people making art, and then I make books. I don't physically make them, but I design the print for them. So I have this sort of all-encompassing art practice that has a lot of different parts to it. So I wear a lot of different hats creatively and professionally, but what you probably know of my work is the book Night Shift and Tamaqua, which I've been promoting and reading from all around Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas in the past couple of months. So that's my project that's out, that's published, but that is certainly not the last project that I will have published.
Oh, I know we got a lot coming. I know that for a fact, and that's what I mean. This is why we really wanted to have you on the podcast. The journey you're on, and even your book, Night Shift and I always say Tamaqua.
I think it's Tamaqua.
We're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about
that. Valley tell me that it was Tamaqua, so I'm going to stick with that.
Because I remember last time we sat down, we weren't really sure.
Yeah, I have confirmation.
Okay,
now.
you got confirmation, and we're going to talk about that journey as well, because that's a great story.
So wait a second. Tell me, I know nothing. So tell me about this book a little. Give me just a little preface.
Sure. So Night Shift in Tamaqua is illustrated. First of all, I collaborated with a painter, Coyote Jacobs, who was also my roommate at the time. So we were collaborating creatively out of friendship, not just professional connection. Nice. But the basic concept of the book is it's about two people. One is a Postmates driver. One is a graveyard shift waitress at a 24-hour diner, and they meet by chance. The Postmates guy doesn't have a car at the moment the book begins, and gets offered a ride by this other character, and they develop a relationship that ends up helping each of them with various things in their life.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic, and it's one of those things where anybody can go through it, right? It's like a normal occurrence.
Yes.
It's not. I really love the fact because I've sat in on a few of your book readings, also, as well as some of the events that you've been holding up recently. Was talking about just two individuals and going through the process of maybe developing a relationship, not actually I don't know. It was very interesting when. I'm just going to say Emma has a lot that's impacted in this, and I don't want to get into that just now, because I really want to talk about how the book developed.
Can you listen to it like is it an audiobook or just digital?
It's just in print right now, but
Okay.
I've had people tell me I should do an audiobook
Yeah.
because I talk a lot and I have a pretty loud voice, and people are like, oh, I'd love to hear you listen to it. And also, audio is a format that a lot of people engage with books in. Like I have friends who have dyslexia, who maybe wouldn't be able to read the book, or just people who honestly, I'm not offended, like people just don't like reading.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I'm going to be personally hurt by if
Right.
they want to listen to the book rather than read it. So
That's-
maybe in the future.
I'm in that boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Audible. I think you should. I mean, definitely it'd be great to go through that. It's just the way the world works these days. There's so many ways to digest
Right.
information or just
I love it while I'm
entertainment.
driving,
Oh yeah,
and I can get through a book in a few weeks.
And you do have like the radio voice. So you have a distinctive voice, and it's one of those things that like, oh, I know who that is when I hear it.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I think an audiobook would be absolutely dope. You know what? Let's take a step back. Let's take a step back because you're actually, you just came to Pittsburgh not too long ago. How long have you been here in this area?
Jeez, it's like 7-8 months. I can't count exactly, but since the end of August last year. So
Since the end of August.
Yeah, I think that would be 7 months.
Yeah, so we're out there. We're out
Yeah.
there. So where are you coming from? I mean, if Pittsburgh's not maybe your home now, but I mean, it may not be, where are you from?
So I'm from New York City originally. I'm born and raised New Yorker. I grew up in Washington Heights, which is this neighborhood on the northern tip of Manhattan up near the Bronx. Many people know it from the movie In the Heights with Lin-Manuel Miranda, but it's this very culturally diverse neighborhood of mostly Dominican, but a lot of other stuff mixed in as well. And it's just a really interesting neighborhood. It's one of the only places in New York, or the only place in Manhattan at least, where the hills weren't blasted down, because when the grid was originally being created for New York City, there was a lot of blasting down of the hills to make them more walkable, but in Washington Heights they didn't do that. And
wow, that's interesting. Interesting.
so you can see why I like Pittsburgh. I'm used to hills.
Yeah, I know, right? This is the place. If you love hills, come to Pittsburgh. This is the city of them. Not just the city of bridges. I think the city of hills as well.
So I grew up in Orange County, California, and it's a very, it's dense. It's not quite New York City, but as far as population goes, it's pretty dense, and there's just like lots of people. And I grew up and I started a small business when I was very young, so I was used to having to promote much harder than other people would, and coming from New York City, when you go to do something and how many people were you doing something when you were in New York? Were you doing something where you were working with yourself or doing your own type of
So I
things?
had my book launch in New York.
Okay. So coming from New York and then going to Pittsburgh, do you feel like it's you have kind of like an unfair advantage to like the work ethic you're putting into some of your events is just kind of like comes a little easier to you maybe than people that are here?
A little bit,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's also a personality thing.
Yeah.
I think that I'm a super driven, ambitious person by nature, but it's kind of a nature versus nurture thing on some level, because, I also I grew up in New York. I played competitive sports for a while. I just had that attitude fostered in me for most of my life, but I definitely think that the market for art is very different in Pittsburgh.
Absolutely.
And I like the ways that it's different from New York.
I love that.
Yeah. What do you think is more different? What's the one things that really stick out to you when you look at the terrain in Pittsburgh and the terrain in New York?
So the other day I went to Corey Edmondson's art opening, which was at this place called, I believe it was called Ruckus Coffee, and it was really, really cool. All the art was spectacular. Corey's a great artist, and I was thinking while I was there, in New York, every gallery you go to is basically the same, because they're all kind of clustered in Brooklyn or in Tribeca. They all have this kind of minimalist look to them, and they're all, frequented by the same kind of people, basically. And particularly when I was working as an art journalist in New York, there were times when I would be around all of these very fancy people, and it felt kind of like everybody was wearing a costume.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
in Pittsburgh, I think that you walk into a show and you really never know what you're going to get, which it's unfortunate that that has dissipated a little bit in New York, but in Pittsburgh, and I think in a lot of smaller cities like Cleveland too, I've had this experience as well. You go to an art opening, you have no idea what you're going to get. Like the artist's family will be hanging out there.
Right.
Someone will be like drinking a beer in the corner.
Yep.
And this particular opening, like the gallery was next to like a Dollar General, and I was loving it. This is awesome because I feel like art should represent the human experience, and the human experience is not a sanitized gallery in Tribeca that's only frequented by people who make $200,000 a year.
I absolutely love that. And just to take a step back, when you said, it's a personality trait, like you're ambitious. I've worked with a lot of artists on this journey in the TT. I'm talking numerous, over 30, 40, maybe even close to about 60 right now. When it comes down to it, Emma, you are one of the people that, I don't, when it comes down to like putting on an event and wondering if the artist is going to show up, I have to keep up with Emma because Emma's going for it every week. Every week I get a call, I get a text. What do you think? Like, could we do a show here? Could we do a show here? I mean, it's like a lot of times I have to kind of drive the marketing and drive everything else.
Right.
With Emma, it's kind of easy breezy because she already goes so hard. I mean, she's been here for 7 months, and
so she might not even know she's doing it. But
no, and it's different, man.
But that's the thing. So how many? Do you know how many million people live in New York City? Like, is there a rough?
Million.
A lot of million. That's the number.
I want to say 5 million, but I'm not totally sure.
So in LA and Orange County, I think we had 17 million, and this is when I was growing up, so it's probably more now. But that's the same population as like Australia.
Yeah.
It's
just
like
in
the
LA,
population of a small country.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know New York has more people than LA now, so I guess it must be higher than my
Probably.
estimate, but I don't know. A lot of people.
So, but the difference, like in Pittsburgh, I think you have like 1.3 or 1.6 million people in the city, and then you have about 3 million people in Allegheny County.
Okay.
So it's not like it's a city, and I love it to death. It's one of my favorite places to be, but it's not as populous as these big cities.
Right.
And when you grew up in it, and when you do events in a big city, and it's like if you put a poster up in New York, how many people are going to show up because you put that poster? You have to just do more. Maybe you have to put up 500, and here you only have to put up 50, and you get the same effect.
Right.
So it's just when we're doing something in a bigger city, we're used to doing that. We're used to putting up 500. Right. So when we're like, oh, I only have to put up 200, but really, normal people would only put up 20.
Right.
And so like we're going above and beyond because we're used to being pushed so hard.
Right.
There's so many people, and you're just like, well, I just got to do all this. And it might not be exactly putting up posters, but just that idea that you're just like, I gotta get people to come out, and there's more opportunity there maybe because there's the capacity's bigger. There are more people that could come, but you have to get their attention and make sure that they come out. So you're used to getting that attention.
So that's really great. And these are all the advantages. What are some of the disadvantages of being in a smaller town that you wouldn't have in New York City?
Oh, my number one disadvantage is car ownership.
Yeah.
Because in New York, you don't need to have a car.
Yeah.
And I do not have a car because right now it is extremely expensive to get a car.
It's
and
ridiculous.
I just got unlucky about the time in which I was born, I guess, because the market that I am entering is not great.
The look on your face when you said that, that was a real thing. That came from the heart. That you were waiting for somebody to ask that question. It was one of those things. So the way you can navigate the city is one of those
tough.
things.
We're one of the toughest cities to. We're tough to drive in too, but It's tough to get around walking. It's tough to get around public transit, bikes. It's not a great city for that.
Yeah.
I found that the fact that I have to put in effort, though, sometimes can be rewarding. Like sometimes, it stops building character and it just becomes miserable. But it is, it has a lot of advantages to it, particularly as a writer. I was thinking about this the other day when I was in Cleveland for an event that I was doing there, and I had to take the Greyhound there rather than driving because I couldn't get there in a car. I mean, I can drive, but it's not like I can just buy a car on a whim and then take off.
Right.
So I had to take the Greyhound there, and as a writer, I think that it actually is an advantage to have to go more slowly and be a part of the world and be a part of the general population. Because also in Pittsburgh, going on public transit, you see, I think, a lot of the class disparity that you wouldn't ordinarily see if you are just driving around in a car and not having to interact with other people.
Absolutely.
So I think in some ways, it's advantage as an artist to be forced to kind of acknowledge the humanity of the place that you're living in. So I try to put a positive artistic spin on it, even though it can be frustrating at times. It has its positives.
Yeah, I enjoy, because also I'm a bus rider, I'm a walker as well, and sometimes being in that passenger seat, you get a chance to, turn your head and look around, where somebody that's driving always has to focus on those signs and what's coming up, where it's like, it's really cool. It's really cool, and I gathered a lot of inspiration from that as well. So I love the way you articulated that. That was eye-opening. Yeah. So all right, let's go, because you were talking about the event in Cleveland, right? And we were just talking about your grind and how you really are ambitious. So you've been here for six months. How many events have you been a part of, and what happens in those events?
So the fact that I have to think about it probably says something.
It says a lot.
But
it says a lot.
Yeah, I at least 3. Yeah, I would say maybe between 3 and 5, depending on what you're counting as a full event, because I have done readings where, I did that. I believe I read from the book at a TT one time at an event where I wasn't headlining, but I was there. So yeah, I would say maybe 4 or 5. And that is a process where you just kind of have to put yourself out there, and it can be very daunting, because something that I've dealt with personally as an insecurity is thinking, oh, I'm so kind of audacious and putting myself out there, and it's probably everyone is just embarrassed for me. It's like the person who very obviously has a crush on someone who doesn't like them back, that kind of embarrassment. Because it feels, it feels like you're having to advocate for yourself all the time, particularly as a self-published author, which is a whole other conversation about the psychological experience of being self-published. It can be very isolating at times, but in terms of putting on events, I just tell myself, I have nothing to lose, essentially. If no one shows up, at least I got my name on the venue at some point, or at least I tried. That there's something to be said for trying.
Sharing the stage with someone,
absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're doing these events, what happens? So you sit down, you do the reading, you're doing the marketing. How are you usually marketing these events to get people to come and fill some of these seats?
So I use social media a lot to market, and I'm not the biggest fan of social media, but I have discovered that Reels are a great tool to get your events on people's feeds, get people interested, because rather than a post which is sort of stagnant, a Reel is something people can watch and engage with a little more. Yep. So I tend to market my events on Instagram in that way. Usually the venue makes a poster or a posting of some kind. Yep. That happened to me with Riverstone Books, happened to me with Ketchup City Creative, Red Hawk. Typically they make it on Canva, and it's actually kind of funny. Red Hawk and Ketchup City Creative use the same Canva template. So as a designer, I was like, oh, you use the same template.
It's almost like you put it out there.
Yeah, I was like, are people gonna think that I just made this myself? But
I did. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've been following. Until this moment, I really thought that. I was like, oh, I guess she's just using the same thing. But
no, it was,
let the cat out of the bag on that one.
Yeah, Nancy and Mary just used the same Canva template, I guess. But no shade or anything.
No shade.
No, they're just doing the thing.
But you know what? I've been to quite a few of those events. I thoroughly enjoy them. In particularly the one, there's two. The one at Riverstone Books, that was very interesting. That was my first. Is that the right name? Riverstone Books.
Yeah, Riverstone Books.
That was in Squirrel Hill. Yeah, that was absolutely my very first time ever going to an event like that. Very interesting, great questions. It was the first time I really got to see you in an environment that wasn't like me and you talking in a TT.
Yeah.
And the questions that came from it. But the one that really stuck with me was the one in Red Hawk.
That was a lot of fun.
That was just so much fun. We had another guy that was there that actually been to Tamaqua as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can get into that story, but it was the interactions, it's a different type of conversation, and sometimes it's not about the book. Well, it is always about the book, but the book can create these conversations about like life and what's happened. And it was if we can talk about that experience at Red Hawk just a little bit, because you were going through the book and there was a guy who wasn't, I don't even think he was there for the book reading, but ended up joining in and told us when he heard Tamaqua, he was like, oh, I've been there. Which was interesting. How he got there was also interesting as well.
Yeah, that was a funny story.
Yeah, it was. It was a. You want to tell it or?
Yeah, the guy there, he got catfished by somebody who lived in Tamaqua. So
catfished in Tamaqua.
That really cracked me up. That was great. I love when people from the Lehigh Valley are at events that I do, because it's a unique part of Pennsylvania. I mean, weirdly, I wrote the book before I lived in Pennsylvania, which is a question I get a lot. People are like, oh, did you choose to write a book set in Pennsylvania because you live there? And I was like, no, at the time I was living in New York. But
and did you just like put your finger on a map and be like, there, that looks like a good name?
Sort of.
That's kind of how it worked.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
Corey knows this story, but I can tell
please
it
tell
again.
it. Please tell it. It's
I know you're a big fan
It's
of
one of my
this.
favorite stories. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, so at the time I was working on the concept of the book with CJ, my illustrator. We had fleshed out the characters a bit. We had talked about the concept, but we were trying to decide where to set it, because we wanted it to be somewhere that was sort of quintessential Americana, but not suburban, not like Westchester County, which is right outside of New York. It's a very like sort of suburban area, but also not rural, because I don't think that rural areas have the same level of kind of commercialism that I was going for. So I was just thinking about this, and at the time I had a sort of distant family member. How I'm related to this person is complicated, but a distant family member had moved to Tamaqua and was dating a girl there, and all my Facebook feed was this particular person's posts about their girlfriend.
Gotcha.
So I was seeing that all the time, and I was just thinking, this is a sort of interesting random place. I don't have a personal relationship with it, but wouldn't it be cool to set a book there? And I looked it up, and I was like, well, that just feels right. And I think some of it was just intuition, that this place feels right. And it just had that kind of in-between feeling that that CJ and I were going for. This something that aesthetically, I think, I was thinking about when I was coming up with the concept for the book. This is a little bit of a side tangent, but the film Ghost World, which is it's with Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson, and they live in this unnamed town, but there's a lot of shots of like just gas stations with like big signs, and then like McDonald's, Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, this
that
kind
old
of
school America.
this
I
kind
can
of
see it.
consumerism that is not like luxury, but is this sort of everyday, like having to engage with these spaces like gas stations and diners and fast food restaurants.
Has you visited Tamaqua yet?
I have not personally been there because it's difficult to get there without a car. But
Okay.
yeah,
touche.
I find a way to work that into everything. But I have not personally been there, but I do want to go there because there's a great organization there called Hope and Coffee. That's a coffee shop that is also advocating for people who are getting sober. It's meant to be a community space that's not a bar, which I think is a great idea. I know in Pittsburgh we have some kind of similar organizations that are just community hangouts where you don't have to drink, which I think is great.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that's necessary. That's also, I enjoy Trace Brewing and places like that because of that, which I know you can drink there, but they also have coffee. They also have other things that you can do. And I just think, just having other places where you can communicate and conversate like a cafe without those things are important. But, so you're keeping in touch with people from Tamaqua. People have contacted you because of this book? Because I know when you put it in, the Google search should really kind of direct you probably to your book first before it directs you to
maybe.
Have you tried?
You don't really want to
yet?
go there. You want to read this book.
You want to read the book before you want to go there.
I haven't had people personally contact me, but I've had people come up to me at readings, and I think that it is a draw because it's a place that it doesn't get written about very much. And that was another thing I was thinking about with the concept of the book because I'm from New York, and I personally don't feel that the representation of New York in books really speaks to my experience having grown up there very well. And I get kind of tired, honestly, of reading books that are just all set in New York. And because New York has a lot to offer, but it's become this literary trope almost, and that's not that interesting to me. And I'm more interested in writing about places that are off the map a little bit and not so much saturated with all of this baggage.
Okay. Yeah, no, I understand that. I can't say I understand it completely because you've seen so much there, and it's just you're probably numb to the things that excite the average person about New York, because you're in it, and when it comes down to it, I really wanted to tap in on to, because I don't want to crap on New York a little bit. I ain't gonna lie to you. I don't want to it's a whole city. It's a pretty big city. They know people.
Well, I mean, with Southern California, I tell people that it's a great place to visit, but it's not really the greatest place to live.
And that's what
I think New York is probably similar.
Yeah, it is similar. I mean,
I love visiting New York.
Yeah.
And Southern California, but
New York has a lot to offer, and it's a great place to grow up. You're exposed to a lot of different kinds of people. You get to be independent at an earlier age because you don't have to drive, and it has a lot of great things in it. But right now, I'm glad I don't live there anymore because it is very difficult in the pandemic to live there for a number of different reasons. But just, it makes me a little sad seeing the level of gentrification in New York now, because particularly with people driving prices up during COVID, New York increasingly has kind of lost some of its character, and there are certain places where that's not true, but there is, like I was talking about with the art scene, I feel like there's a lot of amazing artists in New York, but it's a very difficult place to start an art career right now.
I understand.
Yeah.
So I really want to tap in, and shout out to New York. We're sending our love out there, and from Pittsburgh and beyond, and every other place, because we know it's tough out there. But I really want to talk to you about the self-publishing, because that's a journey in itself. And you like you said, you wear a lot of hats, right? When it comes to the illustration, when it comes to the editing, when it comes to the marketing, when it comes to, I mean, you name it, and when it comes around this, and you're tapping into it. How? It's the real question. That's how.
So self-publishing is a fascinating business. I actually was finding myself imagining doing some kind of investigative journalism podcast about the rise of self-publishing the other day, because it's such a sort of strange business model that's arisen within the past 10, 20 years. So I'm sure that versions of it have gone on earlier than that, but are these two platforms, KDP and Ingram Spark, that are the main ones that people use. And KDP stands for Kindle Direct Publishing and is an affiliate of Amazon, whereas Ingram Spark isn't exactly like a site where you can buy stuff. It's a distributor.
Gotcha.
So Ingram Spark is more distribution based, whereas KDP is a little bit more specific to Amazon and is cheaper and easier to use, but has some drawbacks. If something I learned down the line that I would do differently in my own journey with self-publishing is I would have bought my own ISBN from the get-go and saved myself a lot of trouble instead of letting KDP randomly assign me an ISBN.
What does that mean? ISBN?
Yeah, so an ISBN, it's like a driver's license for your book, is how I've had people explain it to me.
I love that explanation.
Yeah.
I kind of get it, but if you can just dig in a little bit of how that works.
So it's an identifier about your book, basically. It's not exactly the same as owning the copyright, but it's similar. It's like it's a little identifier that tracks where your book goes. And when you upload a book onto KDP, you can choose to have a free randomly assigned ISBN from them, which I thought that paying money for a string of numbers was ridiculous, so I didn't do that.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. But it ended up.
I believe in it. Start small and work your way up. So, and then you learn from it, and now you're going to not do that again.
Yeah, and now I own my own ISBN. It just means there's two versions of my book out there, but there's no real meaningful difference between them other than some slight dimension change in the Ingram Spark version. I believe the Ingram Spark version is 5x8, and the other one is like 5.5 by 8.5 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the same book. So that is a short intro to self-publishing as a concept.
Goodness, I'm not gonna lie, my head is twisted right now, and then you're just getting into the introduction of it. So after you get this number that or you don't get this number, how did you when you put it out there, how did you promote it, or not even promote it, but what does the process look like? You write the book, you put it in there. Is there? I just don't know. So
my path was a little bit unconventional because I chose to publish the book after I realized I had a really amazing marketing opportunity, because I've been writing since I was very young, and I've been producing manuscripts for like at least 6 or 7 years. So the issue for me was not writing a book; it was like the process of publishing a book. And self-publishing is something that's not really discussed in most academic writing programs, at least not to my knowledge. It's still like the model is go to a traditional publisher, go to a small press, things like that. And of course, it is very nice to get the validation of traditional publishing, getting the keys to the kingdom from Simon & Schuster. Who doesn't want that? But as a younger person and as someone who loves to write and is constantly producing, I found myself getting a little bit impatient with that process. And I had an opportunity at One Art Space, which is a gallery in New York City in Tribeca that I had done a lot of journalism work for, and I had a relationship with the curators there. One of them pitched to me, "Do you want to do a book launch here?" And I was like, "Well, first I have to publish a book."
I ain't mad at that. Did you say yes before you even?
I said yes, but I had the manuscript for the book. I told CJ, like, look, I have this opportunity. Can you redo the illustrations, and I'll formally pay you for them, because at the time it was just a concept, it was not something we had really monetized or fleshed out. So I paid him to do an illustration for each chapter. We sort of went over the concepts together, and it was a stressful process getting this book printed before the book launch. So that's part of the reason why I redesigned the cover recently, is that it was very stressful to have to do this on a short notice. So
shout out to Coyote. I just want to put that out there.
Shout out to CJ. He's amazing, incredibly gifted artist. I will plug his stuff basically anywhere I go because he's amazing. He's just a very talented artist and a very creative person who's taken a path that I think a lot of people wouldn't go on, because he's very activism and direct action focused in what he does, which is commendable. I think a lot of people just stick to like posting and reposting, whereas CJ is willing to get his hands dirty and really get involved with stuff, and I really respect that about him.
Emma, I can say the same exact thing about you.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I'm serious. Like when you were just explaining Coyote, and once again, shout out to Coyote. I can't wait to meet you one day.
For sure.
You know, that's the same. There's a reason you guys are. It's one thing when you find your tribe. You know, you find people that are cut from that cloth, and that's every time you talk about Coyote, you talk about the process of how the book was illustrated and how you had to approach it, and you talk about all these great things. Those are the same exact things I see in you. Like I truly believe the way that you approach life in general, because the way you do anything is the way you do everything, but the way you approach life and the way you're approaching this book says a lot about your character, and I believe that's why you are the person you are this early in the journey of life. Because we haven't even talked about how young this young lady is.
Yeah, a lady never reveals her age, but I'm younger than
so
you think
sorry.
I am.
I'm sorry.
I'm kidding. I just, it's like one of those things where people do not know how old I am, and I'll leave it to the listeners to guess.
Yeah,
but
just guess. Put it in the comments.
I'm probably younger than you think I am.
Yeah, and it blows my mind. And maybe it should have been something I talked about before the podcast started. But I just want to say I'm proud of you. And it's your generation, this generation, they're not waiting.
No.
Yeah.
You know, they're not waiting. It doesn't even cross their mind. We used to have to wait for all the stars to align.
Right.
Like, you know, you think of an author, you think of maybe one book a year, or you have about 5 in the chamber. You got about a five on the top of the cabinet.
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly, and still producing.
Yeah, still producing, and I think that more people than like you would think work that way. But the thing about the publishing industry is that it's so competitive and so slow that, like you were saying, you think of people putting out like one book, and that's enough of a labor to, you know, like it's your one shot a lot of the time with publishing. And the thing that always felt frustrating to me was, you know, no artist wants to just have a one shot at success. You want to have a consistent career, and you want people to continue to be interested in your work, and you want to continue to be supported across your career. So I have some beef, obviously, with the publishing industry, but I don't want to be too aggressive in case anybody is listening.
Talk that stuff. Now, just hold up on that.
I'm comparing a lot of this to like how a musician would see a record label,
That's exactly
in their head. So like the way that you're talking, of course, everyone wants that record label, but at the same time, that record label's out for themselves, and they want, you know, they're only going to sign people that they think they can make money off of, and you know, what have you. And if you do it yourself, you have to put a little more work in, but you get a lot more out of it.
The big difference between a record label and a publishing house, though, is that, and I didn't know this about record labels until I was talking to my partner about this recently, but the big difference is that, so publishing houses will give you an advance, and record labels won't.
Right.
Like record labels, you have to pay for it yourself, which is a very controversial thing in the publishing industry.
Unless you're like,
I literally just heard about that on a podcast. I forgot who was it. It was can't think of the name, but they said the book industry is a lot more honest than the record industry.
I can
For
see
the most
that.
part,
Because
I mean,
they say, you know, you go out and you do these things and everything's coming off your budget when you're in the music industry. But in the book industry, they will actually, you know, they'll send you out to this place and that place, and I mean, what it makes is what you make. And they don't take that off of the initial budget when you have to pay them back. It's part of the actual contract, and hopefully I'm getting this right.
I mean, everyone's different, I'm sure.
But and in publishing specifically, there's actually been a big conversation about sort of this new kind of publishing that is sort of pejoratively called a vanity press, which is basically the record label model, which is the author pays up front.
Don't do it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there's obviously everyone's different, but what I find kind of interesting is why so many people gravitate now to this like vanity press model, or the more charitable term is hybrid. And I think the fact that these hybrid presses are existing at all and are, you know, having authors like put out their work through them, and they're not inherently predatory. There are certainly presses that use this model that I think do great work, and what their existence speaks to, I think, is that a lot of people are dissatisfied with the way the publishing industry is now, and there's just not a lot of action being taken on how to change it, and instead there's all of just this controversy about like they're making you pay for the books and all of that, and it's obviously a lot of it is predatory, but it doesn't go to the next level of, okay, well, why is this an option that's even being presented if it's so egregious? And the answer is that so few people are able to actually get their work out there that they are willing to put down like 10 grand for it.
We're in some special times right now.
Yeah.
I think this is going to help. You know, I think what's happening now is actually good. You know, people are standing up.
Right.
You know, that's what I'm hearing. You know, when you're talking, it just sounds like you're taking the power into your own hands to make it happen. He said, I'm not going to wait for you. And I think that's the approach in a lot of creatives' journeys that I feel like it's the old way is now, you know, almost, it's going to be obsolete soon. Absolute. You know, and I just love what you guys are doing and the way everybody's approaching this. Is just, look, I'm going to go do it. You know, I'm not going to wait for you to accept me to get into this room. I'm going to kick down this door, and you're going to have to hear me. It's a beautiful approach. It's almost poetic for me.
Totally.
Yeah. So let's talk about this not just the journey, but I want to talk about, you know, what you have coming, because now, you know, I've heard you and Coyote have reconnected for maybe a new launch for the illustration, or was it Coyote or?
So he did the illustration of the new cover, and it's absolutely beautiful. His Instagram is coyote_illustration. Anyone listening, he posted a detailed version of the spread that I think is very, very beautiful that our listeners can check out.
Let's talk about this relaunch.
Yeah, so I liked the original cover. The type was nice, the art was nice. It wasn't that there was something wrong with it. It was that I didn't feel like it totally represented the book, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm a book artist too. I do interiors, not covers, but I put a lot of stock into the relationship you have with the book as an object. And when I engage with the current layout of it as an object, I didn't feel like it really spoke to the inner workings of the book. And I wanted to do something different. Initially, we were just going to do it for a hardcover version of the book, but then I loved the illustration he was doing so much, I was like, I think this should just be the new cover. Like, this feels really right. And he was able to spend much more time on it because we weren't, you know, cramming for a book launch.
All right.
And it turned out really, really well. He actually asked for a picture of myself and my partner in the pose the characters are in on the cover to use a real life reference, which I thought was sweet.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Yeah, that it had references with the poses, and also I think speaks to how he's grown as an artist since the original cover, because he's on this journey as a sort of self-made artist as well, and he at this point has more experience with illustration than he did at the time. So it shows his kind of technical growth as an artist too, and I think it looks amazing. It's very colorful.
Where I mean, you know, before you leave out of this studio, you're gonna have to show me, because I don't think you exposed it to the public yet, correct?
It's exposed to the public. You can find it on my Substack. You can find it on a reel on my Instagram, and you can find it on CJ's Instagram. So it is to the public, but I can show you definitely.
Yeah, all right, definitely. And also, let's give the people your Instagram as well, where they can find that. Since we're talking about the topic right now.
Oh yeah, totally. So my Instagram is Emma with Glasses. That's my handle on basically everything. So you can find my stuff there on Instagram, where I talk
Twitter.
about. Yeah, I have Twitter as well. I don't really post very much on Twitter, but if you want to connect with me on Twitter, I have that as well. I have a Substack newsletter where I write every week just about things going on in Pittsburgh, going on in my professional life or just something I find interesting, I'll often recommend books or music or something like that in the newsletters. So that's emmawithglasses.substack.com, which you can find in my Instagram link as well. So really the channel that everything goes through is my Instagram. It's easiest to find.
What about TikTok?
I don't have TikTok. TikTok makes me feel old. I know that I'm pretty young, but TikTok makes me really feel like there's a generational difference between me and other people.
I believe there's more people over 30 on TikTok now.
Really? That's funny.
Yeah.
So it's changing.
They said there was more people between 30 and 50 that jumped on TikTok faster than they jumped on Facebook, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So they said it's becoming, it's becoming a place where the senior citizens play. Hello. I don't know, man.
You might be the under 30 crowd. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're not going to give them.
We don't know, which is so mysterious.
Mysterious, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, Reels is amazing, and there's such an opportunity there because it'll show up in other people's, if it seems relevant, it'll show up on people that aren't following you, and you might gain followership from that. And if it goes well, it's easy to get 10, 20,000 views. But if the same thing on TikTok is the viral ability on TikTok, I think is 10 times what it is on Instagram with Reels. Reels are great, and I don't think you shouldn't do them. But I definitely think it's worth doing both.
One of the challenges of marketing a book, and you talking about TikTok made me think of this, is that books by nature are long form, and they're not visual necessarily in the same way that art or music can be when you market it.
Sure.
So it has become a challenge to figure out how to make Reels, what's the most visually engaging way to do it.
Yeah.
And if I were to make a TikTok, I think I would really have to think about the format of how am I going to present something that's by nature not a short soundbite and not necessarily easily digestible. And for me, sorry, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, but there is so much more content on there, I think, that's more similar to what you have than you might realize. And if you just do it and you put it out consistently, it really does. It'll be pushed out to the people that are interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess I have to get on TikTok.
Yeah.
You
sold me. I ain't gonna lie. I'm excited.
Yeah, I just associate it with, like sort of vaguely offensive memes and sort of toxic content.
There's a little bit of everything on there. But so that's the interesting thing is that about the first 72 hours on TikTok, it's trying to to show you everything to figure out what it is you're interested in. And the algorithm is very different than Facebook and Instagram, because Facebook and Instagram, from what I understand, they kind of have a model of you, and then based off of what the model is, they know what to show you. Where the TikTok is using AI, and it's individualized to each user. So if you watch something, like something, favorite it, share it, depending on what how long you watch it twice. They're going to show you more content or less content that's similar to that based off of your user experience. And so it's very intuitive, and your feed versus, I'll sit next to my fiance, I'll watch hers and hers. And
Josh, how much time are you spending on TikTok, my friend? Because he was so poetic when you're talking about this. So,
it's a marketing tool. No, probably, I would say between an hour and 2 hours a day.
Okay. How valuable has it been for PGHPrintShip?
Not yet.
Okay.
But as you know about me, it doesn't matter yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm willing to put time in, because we were huge. My business was when I was in California, when I was first starting out. We were huge on MySpace.
Right.
Nice.
And in this business, we were big on Instagram when we first started. My first year, 70% of business valued $20,000 without any advertising dollars, just off of Instagram.
Beautiful.
Just because I was pushing it.
So you're putting in the work now.
I was working at a call center part-time, and while I was there in between every call, I was just sitting there liking stuff, doing my marketing and leaving commenting. Yins need printing.
I love that. I love that.
And
I love that. So you're putting in the work early before it becomes a thing where everybody's there.
But it makes so much more sense it doesn't matter. You can get on late, but I'd say our TikTok is a little over a year old.
Yeah.
And I don't post as much as I want to. I'm actually working on that right now. And like, I just brought on someone to help create more content. So we're going to be doing 5 posts a day.
Is it somebody I may know?
Larry Lane.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he does Greenfield's Finest podcast. He helps with their stuff.
Right.
And he does a lot of social media marketing and stuff like that. And he's a customer of mine. And I'm like, hey, let's put you to work.
That's really dope. Speaking of podcasts as well, and also just the whole building a digital footprint.
Yeah.
Emma, it's word on the street is you have a podcast as well.
I do have a podcast. Yeah, I have a podcast that I run with my best friend Sav Lucia, who I went to college with, who lives in Glasgow, Scotland. So we don't spend time together physically anymore, though that's going to change in June when I go to Glasgow for a few weeks. So it's going to be really exciting because Sav and I haven't seen each other for quite some time. But so we are the kind of people who we're always having deep discussions, talking about big topics, big questions, and we thought to ourselves, we should start a podcast because we both have this dynamic personality and both enjoy sharing these ideas. So we started a podcast that's called The Why because we met when we lived at a YMCA. And so it's and then the letter Y. And it is just a show where we talk about metaphysics, philosophy, and modern life is the tagline, but really anything. We talk about art. We had an amazing episode with a guy who's a barista in Scotland and who talked about the craft of making coffee and like cafe culture and how it relates to making art and having like that lifestyle, and also how it relates to sobriety because he's also big into that. And we had a mental health professional on in this week's episode, and we talked about mental health, chronic illness, the undercurrents of mental health and sort of the pillars of it. So we really talk about anything. If someone has an interesting story, we'll talk to them, and then we'll do episodes that are just us as well, having that kind of banter with each other. So
we've been doing that same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly how we've been approaching it. And it's just so great to hear that you're also tapping. When our first sit down, that was the first thing that came across my mind. I said, she has to have a podcast. She has to, because once you listen to this, and my mother, one of her favorite podcast on the art of conversation is yours. Just the way that the conversation went and the way that you approach things, the way you articulate things, the insight, letting people into your mind and checking out how Emma Riva just navigates this world. She was just so amazed. She was like, "Oh, you're talking to people that are like the mind is it was just absolutely beautiful." And it's to hear that you have a podcast makes me want to know, where can I find this podcast?
So you can find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We have an Instagram for it. It's ypodcast.info. If you follow me on Instagram, it's in my Instagram bio.
Okay.
So it's easily findable, and we post reels about the podcast on the Instagram, stuff like that, and we put out a new episode every Monday, so there's no shortage of content coming in. So
Emma with glasses on Instagram, on everything. That's how you can find her. All right, so that's great. So is there anything that else that you want to let the people listening know about what you're doing and where you plan to take this journey? I mean, take all this too?
Yeah, I mean, I really try to keep an open mind about everything. So I really don't know where the next thing will lead me in my personal and artistic journey. But I do know that I am going to continue to share Night Shift in Tamaqua with people, but that I'm also working on some other really interesting stuff percolating. I'm working on a book that's set in Pittsburgh right now that I'm feeling really, really good about. And I think that I am really going to try to get that in with a small press and try to have someone else do some of the work that I currently do because it's very tiring.
Yeah,
that's right.
Go ahead.
Speaking of the work that you do, I'm curious if, for one, how long you've been doing it the way you are, and is that your full-time gig, or is that do you have to do some other things to supplement your income, or how does it work?
Yeah, so I wear a bunch of different money-making hats. I'm always coming up with new little freelance money-making schemes. Got you. But you're 100% self-sufficient.
Yeah,
I'm not. Well, I'm I do freelance work for particular organizations, but I'm hired as like a contractor.
Right.
So it's not as if I am doing a 9-to-5 job, and I
Got
work
it.
from home as well, which is nice.
Yeah.
I make money as a book designer for a small press that actually falls under the hybrid model we were discussing earlier. So I've gotten some interesting insight on how that model works and kind of why people gravitate towards it.
Okay.
And I also do some design for a nonprofit that does like creative writing education that I was a part of myself when I was younger, and they were actually my first job. I've been doing book design for them for about 6 years. My first job with them was as a teaching assistant, not a designer, but I ended up in that job because someone else quit it and they needed someone else to do it, and that was actually how I learned in design and book art. And something that I find very interesting now was just out of the necessity that someone else needed it. Yeah, and so that's one thing I do. Then I also I write grants for this organization called Poppy Muse. That's another name to plug for people to check out, because they're a great organization. They're a foster youth advocacy organization run by a former foster youth. The founder, Tamaqua McLean, is a very prominent activist for foster youth, and it's a very interesting organization. So definitely look them up. It's Poppy like the flower, and then Muse, M-U-S-E. So you can Google them, go to their site, go to their Instagram. So those are just two examples of the hats I wear.
Got
so I
you.
do kind of writing adjacent stuff.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, different.
Yeah.
Different. I every time that we sit down and talk, I leave with a little bit more. One thing is just inspired.
Right.
But just also I have comfort to know that the generation coming up, man. I don't know what this is going to end up being, but man, I'm so excited to see this. More people that are like Emma out there that are, and I'm just grateful to know here, and just everything that you're doing is just mind-boggling. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what the future holds for you, because I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to make a dent in this world. Literally, I have no doubt in my mind. And it's people like you that's going to make this world even beautifuler than what it is. Beautifuler. I don't know if that's a word, but more beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful to know you.
Yeah.
At this point, because I don't know if we're going to be able to get to you soon.
Remember us when you're big.
Just remember us. Just remember us, Emma.
I think a part of that is that they are producing content, not just more easily and more comfortably, but also less perfection. Not that their work is any downgraded than work that might have been out 30 years ago, but people there might have been more of an entry fee kind of, or more of more gatekeeping,
right.
Where now you can do so much on your own. The DIY is really it's available. You can get it onto, you can publish onto Amazon Kindle or whatever, and so it's available. It's more available where anyone can publish anything, and so there's a lot more out there.
Yeah.
So that restriction is more of a restriction you have on yourself. So obviously, the better you do, the more people are going to like it, and that's going to get out there. But I think this generation that is coming up and growing up, they realize the power that they have, and I think a lot of the older generation maybe was told they couldn't do it,
right.
Told that you're not good enough, or you're not, and you get things put in your head from family or friends or people that are jealous of you, that you actually listen to, where this generation is more like, well, let me see if it works.
Right. And I think it's more
great.
And I think that they have the access, and also that's the beautiful world that we live in today. We have access to see other people approaching this thing that we're approaching. Where before, the internet started to thrive and all this social media started to thrive, we had to go off of, hearsay pretty much a lot of times, and try to, it's kind of harder to find those circles or those people doing the thing that you want to do, so it's like, okay, I have to find that, and then find the right person that maybe can help mentor me into doing this, or I can see them approaching this, and to know that it's even possible, and maybe find a better way to navigate it where it is just so accessible. It's everywhere. It's you don't really even have to know. How do you know that? Let me just Google this thing. And I think the most powerful thing that's been invented so far is these space age modulators in the pocket. Yeah, that's why I call them y'all space age modulators. I'm giving away my. It's that the space age modulator 3000 is everything Marvin the Martian gifted us with now. But it's a beautiful thing, and I'm excited to be a part of this world at this time, and it's just things like this that are happening, man. I don't know, we don't know where this is going, but I'm excited to see this thing, man. So, Emma, is there anything that you want to say to somebody that may have been that may be where you want to be at, where you're at now, like a young Emma Riva? What would you say to her if you had a chance?
So actually, I was just having this conversation with my therapist today about
I'll bill you after the podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
About what would you say to your younger self, and sort of recognizing how proud your younger self would be of you. And I think if was the question, what would I say to her, or what would she say to me?
What would you say to her?
I think I would say to her that you don't have to do it all on your own, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive to everything we were just talking about entrepreneurship and all of that. But I think that something I internalized as a teenager was having to be responsible for myself. And that was something that was a big kind of weight on me when I was in college and then kind of coming out of that. And I think that a lesson that I'm still learning is that you don't always have to be 100% self-reliant, and nobody is. Nobody is. Even the biggest tech startup entrepreneur still calls their mom and all of that. It's nobody is truly self-made, and I think that talking to my younger self, I would say, you are going to accomplish some really cool things, but you are also going to realize that it doesn't do any good to cloister yourself away and think that you have to do it all yourself.
I love that. And I think on that note, we're going to take this out.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, Emma, thank you for being a part of this. It's a gift. This is a gift right here, and we appreciate you for coming on. One more time, let's give them one more time. I know they just heard your handle, but let's do that one more time before you go out, and where they can find your book and everything.
So my Instagram is Emma with Glasses. Twitter is Emma with Glasses. TikTok coming soon, potentially.
Yo, that would be great.
Yeah, and you can find all the links to buy my book on my Instagram, but in case you were really inspired to do it from just listening to this podcast and you're waiting with bated breath in front of your computer, you can type in tinyurl.com/nightshift in Tamaqua, and you can just get it from there. So if you were so excited by everything I was saying that you need it now, you can do it at that link.
Hello. And don't forget about the podcast, too.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So you can find my podcast at ypodcast.info on Instagram. That's also our website URL, so it's very easy. Gotcha. So you can find all of our episodes there and all of the interesting conversations that we've had.
Hello, and my name is Corey Ochai. I'm also the host of The Art of Conversation, and I want to say thank you guys for listening in. Hopefully this podcast has brought some value to your life, and you can use some of these things to navigate this beautiful world that we live in. I want to say go out there, do something beautiful. The world is counting on you, and remember this world is a blank canvas, and it's up to us to create a masterpiece. And once again, just want to thank Emma for being on here, and I think a good friend of mine's over here has something to say as well.
So thank you for listening. My name is Josh Snyder, and you've been listening to Thoughtful Discussions. I kind of mentioned the print shop and business and growing up and all this sorts of stuff, which you'll hear more if you do listen more. But if you want to check out our print shop, it's PGHPrintShip.com. PGHPrintShip.com. We do all sorts of paper, stickers, banners, T-shirts, lots of different printing type things, and we're over here in Pittsburgh, but we ship just about anywhere. So hit us up. We'd love to work with you. Thank you for the opportunity listening, and a lot of our listeners are customers, a lot of our guests are customers as well. Thank you for the work, Emma.
Of course.
And it is it's a wonderful community to be a part of. We're deep in the arts community and the small businesses, and it's just this is just one more layer that I'm able to go into and do this podcast, and it is it's always a reminder of how thankful that I am of this community and being able to do this and be here. So thank you all for listening. Thanks for being on. Thanks for being my co-host.
Man, I'm all the way here for you. I'm all the way here for you.
I love it.
Yeah, so guys, once again, go out there, do something beautiful. World's counting on you, and we are out.